participants, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the International Lecture Series 2, year 2025. We are very delighted to have all of you here at this event today that will discuss about theory and practice of climate migration. Firstly, I would like to welcome the Head of Urban and Regional Planning Department, Professor Dr. Ing Wiwandari Handayani, ST.M.T. MPS, and our honorable guest lecturer today, Dr. Johannes Herbeck. Our honorable guest lecturer today, invited lecturer Dr. Johannes Herbeck, is from Sustainable Research Center, Department of Geography, University of Bremen, Germany, and host lecturer is Bapak Dr. Sariffuddin, and the moderator is Ibu Maya Damayanti, Ph.D. Welcome to our beloved lecturer from Urban and Regional Planning Department, students and everyone who joining online from Zoom and YouTube channel. Before we jump to the main event, please kindly see the event agenda for today. Mbak Inung, can you please share screen the event agenda for today? Okay, this is the event agenda for today. First is opening remarks from Head of Department Urban and Regional Planning, Ibu Prof. Wiwi. The main event is Lecture 1 from Dr. Johannes Herbeck. Dr. Johannes Herbeck will talk about climate migration of Germany, European case. And Lecture 2 is from Dr. Sariffuddin. Dr. Sarif will talk about tracing climate gentrification through property tax records, a data-driven approach to risk-based displacement. Then discussion and conclusion from moderator, and the last is closing and photo session. Now, I would like to welcome opening speech from Head of Urban and Regional Planning Department, Ibu Profesor Dr. Ing Wiwandari Handayani, ST.M.T. MPS. The time is yours.
Thank you so much, Bu Asri, for the warm introductions. I just want to take this opportunity to say hello to my colleague here. Of course, to Pak Johannes Herbeck. Thank you very much to be able to participate in our regular programs within the department. We call it as an international guest lecture series organized by Ibu Landung. Thank you so much, Ibu Landung, to organize this series with Ibu Astri. And I'm delightful today also to have Pak Sariffuddin, who has just completing his doctoral from the Netherlands, moderated by Ibu Maya. Thank you also, Bu Maya. And just to a brief intro to all the participants here, we have several undergrad and postgraduate students in the department, and also we will distribute or upload this in the YouTube with the expectation that these issues can be accessed by a wider audience. And Pak Johannes, and also particularly for the students and colleagues here, that we try to organize this program as a platform for us to discuss new or issues within our knowledge in regard to urban and regional planning, with the expectation that different topic from different guest lectures with different background can give more fresh ideas, not only for the students with their final thesis or final works, but also for us, the lecturers, to be able to have the updated research worldwide, and to take something and maybe will lead to a new idea for our next research agenda. That's actually the main idea why we organize this guest lectures or international guest lecture series since in the last 3 or 4 years, Bu Landung. So maybe next time, Bu Landung, we need to really count how many guest lectures that you have organized since maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, since
From different
2021, Bu.
Yeah, so this is the fourth
Yes.
years, yeah, supposed to be. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mulanu, for your hard work. And yeah, without any further ado, I will hand it over to Bu Asri again, maybe for Bu Maya to also organize or manage the sessions today. And thank you again, Pak Johannes and Pak Sarif, and look forward for all of us here to have your lectures and also a nice discussions afterward. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And yeah, I hand it over again to Bu Astri. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the warm welcoming remark from Ibu Prof. Wiwi. So I hand over this lecture to Ibu Maya Damayanti as a moderator. Please welcome Ibu Maya. The time is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bu Astri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon for everyone. I hope you are in the good situation today. As mentioned before, we will have two lectures in this afternoons. The first one is Pak Johannes Herbeck from Sustainable Research Center, Department of Geography, University of Bremen, Germany. And the second one is Pak Sariffuddin from our Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Universitas Diponegoro, Indonesia. Before Pak Johannes start your lectures, let me read your short bio, Johannes. Okay. Dr. Johannes Herbeck is a researcher and lectures at the Sustainability Research Center and the Department of Geography, University of Bremen. And his specialization is in coastal adaptation policy, policy mobility, and political ecology. From his record, he's very earned researching about the climate change. And recently, he has a research on the climate change adaptation and urban resilience. And yes, his current research in the epistemic mobilities of sea level rise adaptation across Jakarta, Manila, Singapore, contributing to global sustainability efforts. Yes, it's very interesting background from Pak Johannes Herbeck. I'm sure that during his session, Pak Johannes will give a lot of valuable information related to his topic. So, Pak Johannes, please start your lectures. Yes, Johannes, you can start. Yeah.
Yes, one moment. I will try to share my screen. One second. Oh. I'm still struggling a bit. One moment. Does it work now? Yes. Okay. So, very good afternoon from my side. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for having me today as being part of your very interesting international guest lecture. I was really happy to hear the motivation behind your guest lecture, and I'm happy to contribute to it and also to learn from you and from the discussions with you. I think it's invaluable, this kind of exchange also between different colleagues, also some new colleagues, others that I already know, like you, Ibu, Vivi, and I'm also happy to meet all of you, Ibu Maya, Ibu Astri, and also Pa Sariffuddin. I'm looking forward to his lecture as well. So I was invited to talk a bit about theory and practice of climate migration. an issue that has been part of my research agenda for a really long time. I started looking at or thinking about climate migration issues with my PhD that I started in 2008. So at a time when the topic was still less prominently debated, I would say, the discourse would already start to grasp more attention, but it was at that time still a relatively new discourse and discussion that entered many areas at that time. I will try to this is a quick outline of what I'm going to do for this lecture series, which is probably taking a bit more time than the 30 minutes that are in the program. So I hope that will still be okay. I would like to give an overview of the debate at the beginning and look especially at some of the controversies and critical positions that developed in the recent years towards the issue of climate migration. I would then continue with some examples how we try to factor in also those criticisms and the controversies into what we've been doing in the area of in the research on climate migration that happened at our institute and continues to happen. I will also bring some examples, but not too much of the research that we've been doing in Indonesia. And I will then end with a clip, with a very quick reflection, maybe what the climate migration discussion means also in the German and European context. It's going to be a rather short part of my lecture because the discussion in Germany and Europe is not really advanced, which is probably one of the results that will then also close my remarks. But as I said, I would like to start with the debate and also go back a little bit to the time when I started engaging with the discussion of climate migration. And I'd like to start with a couple of photographs that were part of an exhibition in the year 2010. So 2 years after I started getting involved with climate migration as an issue and as a discourse. An exhibition that took place in London at that time that was called Postcards from the Future, and it tried to anticipate changes that were expected for the year probably 2100 or so in the UK. And some of the postcards that you see here, they look, I would say, rather pretty, and also account for the kind of insecurities that are connected to the climate change debate. So no one really knows what is going to happen. So that's one of the reasons why you see on the left-hand side the idea of ice skating at the Tower Bridge. So also the possibilities of much cooler climates if, for example, the larger oceanic current systems are breaking down, which no one already knows. That could mean for Europe a much colder climate. The other shows the Piccadilly Circus, also with some kind of positive images, a lot of energy generation at places that are probably nowadays not really suited for that, but also already a lot of water in the city at places where it's not there at the moment. If you continue looking at some of those photographs in the exhibition, you also see more pessimistic reflections and accounts for what could possibly happen in future. So there's someone should mute his microphone, I think. On the left-hand side, it's a photograph that shows a water crisis at Parliament Square with the involvement of military for organizing water supply. Hinting towards water shortages as a possible result of climate change. And also on the right-hand side, tornado that hits Whitehall in the UK, a very dark and grim image that takes a more pessimistic account of the future for London. And then finally, there's also some images that already hint to the topic of our guest lecture today, namely the migration issue. One shows the Buckingham, the area in front of the Buckingham Palace, that is then imagined to be a shanty in the future, that is also very kind of unorganized and a bit chaotic, and depicts some of the fears and expectations of continuous migratory influxes caused by climate change. And on the right-hand side, you also see a depiction of the Trafalgar Square, which is also here seen as a shanty, a site for shanties or areas that are changed through increasing migration patterns in the future. So you already see that from also in this early times, 2010, there were also fears and security issues that were somehow connected to the idea of potential climate migration in the future. And that gets even more dramatic if you look at this screenshot of a documentary that came out at the same time, also in the year 2010, called Climate Refugees. So this screenshot is like one of the main messages that were transported through this movie or this documentary, that climate migration does have an impact also on the global north, here specifically North America, that is really in the middle of many red arrows that target at North America as a potential destination of climate-related migration flows. I'm always wondering why people from Canada, because the arrows are coming from all directions, why people from Canada should move to North America in the context of climate change. But the movie makers, I think, had an idea behind that. So, but it already shows that some of the or parts of the discourse around climate migration were really also taking very pessimistic and also fear-related turns, and depicted some of the countries in the global north as being threatened and in danger of migration flows that are probably not controllable anymore in the context of climate change. So in general, in those years, in the early 2000s, maybe starting around 2005, the discourse and the discussions around the idea of climate migration really took hold and increased very much since then. There has been a huge attention towards the issue in scientific debates, but also in the political sphere. I will show some of the documents in a minute. The reason for the success story of the discourse, I would say, has also been laying in this, what I call here, hinge function, a connective function of the discourse, because obviously the idea of migration carries the climate change impacts, which at that time at least were mainly located in the global south countries, but through migration patterns, it connected the discourse also to countries of the global north. So that's probably why it has been so successful, and it has been also connected to, as I showed, those fear-mongering parts of the discourse. So when I started looking at the discourse or the discussion, I also looked at some of the documents that came out at that time. On the left-hand side, you see a book that was quite successful by a philosopher, Harald Welzer, a German philosopher, that was called Klimakriege, Climate Wars, that made a very direct connection between environmental changes or climate-related changes to conflicts in the 21st century. That was a huge success, the book, and was read by many people. And the idea then also came to, for example, to the German parliament. On the right-hand side, you see a document from the German parliament that looked at at climate change as a security risk and what the German government should do about that. And similarly, in the middle, there's a document from the EU Commission that also dealt with the question of climate related security risks and what European Commission should be doing about that. And also in the United Nations General Assembly in 2009, there was a resolution adopted by the General Assembly also dealing with possible security implications of climate change. And in those debates, those security related debates, the idea of migration has always been very central. As I said, migration as a potential connective point of departure that brings in those security risks in the global south to the global north countries. And from the very beginning, there was a strong also use of maps and images that tried to locate some of those security risks on a very broad and global scale. So what you see here is a map that was introduced to the German government in 2007 by scientific board that introduced also the idea of hotspots. They are called Brennpunkt here, which is the German translation for hotspots in some areas of the global south that are confronted with some of conflict constellations brought to those areas by climate change, and that could be degradation of water resources, storm and flooding events, increasing storm and flooding events, but also the decrease of the production of food caused also by degradation of water resources and so on. And all of this is then connected and brought together by this idea of environmentally based migration that is symbolized with this symbol here, and that is also located in, for example, North and Sub-Saharan Africa, India, but also some in China and South America or Middle America, which is really stunning also until today, is that there's no mentioning at all of some of those hotspots in the European context. So the Northern Hemisphere is really empty. There's no conflict constellation at that time that has been considered to be also relevant for the European or North American context. A little bit maybe here in the Middle American context, swapping over to North America, but that's the only area that is really a part of those conflict constellations that are seen here. So when you look at this, how the issue has been, discussed on a political base, it's already clear that there has been an increasing attention, and that continues to be so. So it's still an issue that is debated in scientific or in political spheres, but it has also from the very beginning been a scientific debate. And so the point I want to do here, or to make here, is that from the very beginning, in those more scientific accounts of climate related migration, there has been from the very beginning strong controversies and also very critical positions towards terms and also parts of the debate. And I would like to continue with some of those controversies. So those are three elements that I think have been subject of controversies and also criticisms in the discourse. So the first was related to numbers and projections around climate migration. A second controversy was around how to term the phenomenon, and also how to translate it into international law. And finally, and probably most fundamental, there was also a discussion around the strength of correlation between environmental change and migration, or even the idea of a direct causality between the two areas that has been heavily criticized. And I want to stick with those three discourses or controversies for a while. So first, regarding numbers and projections, I'm showing a relatively recent projection here of climate migration by the International Organization for Migration from 2022, who tried to look into different regions, world regions, and potential climate migrations, migrants by the year 2050. So you see that there's a differentiated idea behind it. So for each region, you see 3 bars that reach, that also have a certain variety and that have three different scenarios. We know that from, for example, climate science, that also very much work with emission scenarios. In this context, it's more trying to factor in that there might be, for example, more inclusive societal developments, or generally a more climate-friendly societies that are here in this yellow graph, that could also reduce the number of expected climate migrants in those regions. It's also interesting to see that it's only talking about internal climate migrants, so the idea of border crossing is not in there anymore. So this differentiation and this also idea of different scenarios has been not really in those earlier projections, and the ideas of numbers or discussions around potential numbers of climate migrants that were part of the debate early on. For example, Norman Myers has prominently made calculations how many people are expected to migrate in the course of climate change, and talking about something like 500 million people that could be potentially displaced in the course of climate change until 2100. And there were even higher numbers that were projected with sometimes very simple ideas behind it. For example, Norman Myers simply took areas below a certain sea level and calculated how many people would be living in those areas. And that then was his number that he took as potential climate migrants. For example, not accounting for ideas of adaptation that are very prominent in those areas. So the idea of trying to project and to see what is potentially or will be potentially happening in future is still there, but it has been very much criticized and debated. So the second controversy around climate migration was the idea, or was discussions around terms and definitions. I'm showing here a graph by Felicitas Hillmann and colleagues who were collecting the different kinds of terms and names people would be coming up with in the discourse, reaching from the very early mentioning of environmental refugees by El Hinawi and also Norman Myers that I've mentioned earlier, that are here, this first red circle. Then a lot of many other names like climate refugee, climigration, climate change induced displacement, forced environmental migrant, and things like that. So a lot of different names and terms that have been used in those discourses. And I've also circled here the idea of environmental migrant at the very bottom, that has been established also by the International Organization for Migration research project EACH4 that happened in the early 2000s. And the definition that has been brought or introduced by the international organization, which I'm showing here, has been probably the most cited one and most often used one. So the International Organization for Migration talks about environmental migrants. That is their term that they're using. And they define them as persons or groups of persons who, predominantly for reasons of sudden or progressive change in the environment that adversely affects their lives or living conditions, are obliged to leave their habitual homes or choose to do so either temporarily or permanently, and to move either within their country or abroad. So it's a very broad definition that is still used by many people and also referred to continuously, that accounts also already to some of the critiques and controversies that were part of the discourse from the very beginning. So, for example, this definition includes people who are forced to leave their habitual homes, but they also include people who choose to leave their homes. So it's not the idea of climate refugees as they have been depicted, for example, in this documentary that I've been showing, but they also target people who are voluntarily choosing to migrate because their living conditions in their places of origin are changing. And it's also clear that they include sudden or progressive changes, also a part of the discourse that has been very important. Are we talking about sudden onset events like storms or storm surges, or are we also including slow onset changes like increasing drought situations that then affect, for example, agricultural production systems or so? So that are some of the nuances of the discourse that have been debated very early on, and that have then also led to this definition. And finally, and as I said, probably the most fundamental discussion of climate migration from the very beginning was that in how far can we really establish correlations between environmental change and migration decisions, or can we even talk about a direct causality between environmental change and migration? And especially coming from the migration scholars that were also working on climate migration as a term and as a phenomenon, there were rather skeptical voices that have established themselves very prominently in the discourse. And I'm bringing this rather complex graph here by Richard Black and colleagues. Richard Black is also a migration scholar that has worked on the issue for a long time. Also, for example, for the UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Organization, and he was developing together with colleagues a very indirect consideration of the effects of environmental change on migration decisions. So what you see here on the left-hand side is the influence of environmental change on different drivers of migration decisions. So what is probably in the center of this graph is this idea that there are migration decisions that people are taking that are very much dependent on different factors on micro, meso, and macro levels. So if we start, for example, at micro levels, Richard Black and his colleagues are really considering that there are household or also personal characteristics of people that very much influence their decision to migrate. And those decisions are then, for example, depending on their age, also the gender, education aspects, also questions of ethnicity and religion, a language that play into migration decisions. On a meso level, Black and his colleagues are considering different, for example, political frameworks, also the social networks that people or households would have, links to a diaspora in the countries of destination, for example, also factors like the costs of moving that very much influence the decision to migrate. And then finally, that's probably the core of what they have been thinking about, are those macro level factors that influence migration decision that reach from environmental factors over political, demographic, economic, and social factors, and that are themselves under the influence or potential influence of environmental change and different drivers of, for example, climate change. So this rather complex framework around the decision whether people migrate or stay has been cited relative or very much, and has been also critically acclaimed as an important contribution to the discourse. And it's of course then very far away from the rather direct relations that, for example, Norman Myers has been seen, who was only looking on a very particular environmental driver and was assuming that everyone who would be in contact with this driver would migrate. So there was a rather direct link, and Black et al. Have kind of collected this idea of the multifactorial nature of migration decisions into the discussion around climate migration. And I think this position has been establishing more or less clearly. So nowadays, if migration scholars talk about climate change migration, they always or almost always factor in this idea of the complexity of migration decisions and the less linear connections between climate changes or environmental changes and migration decisions. And this is some quotes from a more recent article by Ingrid Boas and colleagues in Nature Climate Change. So already like a widely cited scholarly article that has also reconfirmed again some of the doubts and reservations of the migration scholars towards the issue. And they say also the potential for climate change to disrupt livelihoods and threaten lives is real. The policies reinforce a false narrative that predicts large numbers of climate refugees. This self-referencing narrative in scientific literature and policy reports has the consequence of entrenching climate migration as a looming security crisis without an empirical scientific basis. So this is relatively clear. So they state that there's no empirical scientific basis that confirms those large numbers of climate refugees. And they continue to say categorizing climate migrants is distinguishable from non-climate migrants is not empirically possible in most, if not all, circumstances. So it's also a very clear statement that it's almost impossible to empirically show that there are climate migrants that are different from non-climate migrants. So what is relatively clearly known by now, after this discourse has been going on for some years, that there are little hints towards a direct causality between environmental or climate changes and migration decisions, which is also due to the fact that migration decisions are complex and multifactorial. If at all, we see different forms of temporal or circular migration that are probably the result of environmental and climatic changes. And in almost all cases, we see that there's no international migration. So if you think back about the red arrows that all point towards North America, that is really not, at least so far, not the reality of climate-related migration. And on a more fundamental level, the discourse on climate migration itself is said to be using under complex description of the root causes of migration and environmental change. It's even, there has been claims that the discourse uses racialized stereotypes for the description of migration reasons. The discourse victimizes migrants and often leaves them without agency. And as Ph.D. has recently said, it is also characterized by a research gap between the global north and the global south, and that comes with two levels. First of all, the main research that is done on climate migration or environmental migration looks at examples in the global south, but it is carried out by scholars in the global north. So there's a double research gap, I would say. So the focus of the examples is often in the global south, and the scholars who are carrying out the work are often coming from the global north. And I of course, I wouldn't exclude myself from this criticism. So what does this mean now? If there's this clear criticism and this very fundamental critique towards the term and the discourse as in general, where do we move then instead? And also Ingrid Boas and her colleagues, but also others in recent years have advocated for a transition of the research. They say that research should shift its attention from climate migration to climate mobilities, so taking in a much broader term. And they argue that such a program would encompass the multiple forms, directions, and multiplicities of human movement in the context of climate change, as well as the transformative character of mobility and its impact on places of origin, transit, and destination. So this is a kind of a way out and how to proceed from here. And so in the next part of my talk, I will try to show how we at our institute try to account for this criticism towards this sometimes simplistic idea of climate migration, and how we try to also account for these ideas of thinking, for example, about climate mobilities instead of climate migration. And I would like to use two research projects that we've been carrying out in the past to show how we did this. The first project was called New Regional Formations. It started in 2014 and continued for 3 years, and it looked at rapid environmental change and migration in coastal regions of Ghana and Indonesia. So you see again scholars from the global north looking at places in the global south. So yes, we are also part of this criticism. That is clear. We try to look at two areas, one in Semarang, in Java, and the other in Ghana, which I'm going to concentrate a bit more on, because you know probably better than I do the situation in Semarang. This is a map of the city of Kita in Ghana, in West Africa. That was one of our research foci. And you see a receding coastline here that goes from the blue coastline in 1907 to the coastline, the green coastline in 2029, until the red coastline in 2095. This is also about the coastline where the place where the coastline is today. But in those less than 100 years, the coastline receded by 200 or 300 meters, also eating away streets, buildings. You see here something that is called Bremen Factory. There's also very interesting connections between this area and the area where I'm living, Bremen. There has been a Christian mission that has been established in the early 20th century, and that has also been washed away by the continuous erosion that the area has been seeing in those 100 years. So if you look at Semarang and the historic reconstruction of the coastline, you see in the first place, you see a different direction of the coastline. The red line is the coastline in 1847. You probably know this map as well. And it shows, I mean, an extension of the coastline, accretion of sediment material from in those 150 years that are now also responsible for the strong subsidence in some of the areas on this fresh sediment that you all are very much aware of. But still, so for both areas that we looked at were both characterized by relatively rapid environmental changes along the coast, and we tried to account for those complexities in migration decisions by also the setup of our research project. So you see the different areas that also we looked at scientifically, reaching from policy responses, economic strategies, migrant trajectories, obviously as an important part, also trying to better understand the environmental change that is going on and the risk cultures that are part of those also migration decisions or the decisions not to migrate. So this was our attempt to conceptualize those complexities around environmental change and migration in those areas. The project as a whole had the idea to understand those emerging forms of regionalization in the context of environmental change and human mobility or migration. And for us here at ARTEC, we were part of those policy, looking at the policy responses, and we were trying to understand the different forms of adaptation to rapid environmental change in the study regions, and to also reconstruct past measures and understanding policy processes across different governmental levels and different actor sets, as we thought that those are important elements that also impact migration patterns. And I'd like to jump into the situation in Keita, in Ghana, and the adaptation processes that we were analyzing here. That started in the mid-1980s already, when the erosion problem along the West African coast was, for example, discussed in the context of the European Economic Community, and there was an integrated sea defense plan that was put into place already in the late 1980s. So the planning is from that area, and that is something that has been proposed then in the mid-90s, like a system of groins that were planned to be erected along the coast in Keita to stop the erosion process. The design at that time came from an Italian company that was then later taken up by what is here called the Great Lakes Dredging Company, an American company that took those original Italian plans and developed them further. And then finally, as we found out also in the interviews, it was a US company that carried out the design, the works in this area. It was the Americans that did the design. They have the satellites. They will approach the government and saying, look, this is serious. They will make a proposal, and they even have a banking support. So there has been a strong influence also of international companies in this area. So this was probably the first remarkable thing that we realized when coming to the area, that those adaptation mechanisms, they don't happen in isolation. There's a strong influence, for example, of external actors in those solutions. A second remarkable thing probably is not that clear in this picture. If you look here, you see that on the lee side of those groins that have been then put into place finally, there are erosion patterns that are probably new. So, and that has been also confirmed by our colleagues who looked at the environmental processes behind that, that the erosion processes have been aggravated. If you look at this side here, directly at the groins, you would see stronger erosion than probably before, and that is even more dramatic if you go then further down the coast after the last groin ends. There are strong erosion processes that are really caused by this adaptation strategy itself. So that was something that we were particularly also surprised to see, that there are sometimes unexpected impacts of adaptation measures. Third thing that we realized, or that we found interesting also in this area, are those resettlement plans that were part of the adaptation strategy. And it's also clear that here there's a part of the interview contractor that admits that we've been having issues. Some people resisted resettlement, and they do until today. I could not enter some areas as people have been very upset with the resettlement. So also the kind of micro mobilities that often come with those with those adaptation plans are then often somehow unexpected and also probably not really factored in the very beginning of those adaptation strategies. And then finally, what came probably as the biggest surprise, we also did a larger quantitative study in the area that asked for reasons why people decided to migrate. And as you see here, there's a lot of the highest share of people say that migration decisions are taken because of work, looking for work. Also, education is an important scheme. Family reunification play a big role. But if you look for the environmental change aspect, you see that it's less than 1% of the people that have been migrating in the area have stated that environmental change has been a decisive part of their decision. And that was, I mean, it really came as a surprise for us that it has been so little. I'm looking into time. Is it okay if I still continue for 5 more minutes, maybe?
Yes, 5 minutes is okay.
5 minutes, okay. So then I'll be quick here. The second project that I'd like to quickly mention is the project Immersa, and also the second project, Blue Urban, that then took the idea of mobilities more serious and probably departed a bit from looking at migration in a more narrow sense, but also tried to involve the idea that also knowledges and technologies are mobile, especially technologies related to adaptation strategies. And we looked at different cities in Southeast Asia, Jakarta, Manila, and Singapore, and tried to understand in how far there are connections between those 3 cities. And we've looked, for example, at the NCICD processes in Jakarta, the no retreat adaptation pathways, and the disaster risk reduction Manila Bay master plan, and also try to understand in how far international players are part of developing those solutions, and in how far knowledges around environmental change and suitable adaptation strategies are part of those globalized networks. I'll skip that and come to maybe a short attempt to look at what climate migration discourses mean in German and European contexts, and where are potential connections. As I mentioned before, the discourses in Germany and Europe regarding own impacts of climatic changes on migration patterns are very rare. So there's not a big research agenda that tries to look at those impacts of climate change on the European continent that are potentially also triggering internal migration patterns. So that is really something to start with. The discourse is virtually absent. I would still like to look at some of the projections regarding climate change for the European context. You probably know that the European continent is projected to be one of the hotspots of global warming, and it's already happening. So we've been seeing a higher warming trend than many other regions in the world. On the left-hand side, you see projected changes in annual mean temperature until the year 2050, I think. And you see that there are warming trends, especially in the northern European sphere, but also in southern Europe, Spain and Portugal, Italy, the Balkans, and then especially also Turkey, that are projected to be warming and sometimes very high rates, more than 5 degrees Celsius higher than the reference period. And also, when it comes to precipitation, there are clear trends. Again, the southern European countries experiencing very much decreasing precipitation, whereas northern European countries are faced with increasing precipitation. So there are changes in some of the very fundamental climate factors that are of course then having impacts also on societies. And finally, again, the idea of sea level change. I've marked here areas that are below 1.5 meters of water. And you see that there are large areas in the Netherlands, in Germany. Also, the city of Bremen here you see is where I work and live. There's someone who's opening his mic. Okay. The city of Bremen, where I work and live, is also an area that is potentially very much in danger of sea level rises. Also, the city of Hamburg. So there are also facts and projections that are very serious. And I think for European, when it comes to the idea of habitability, so areas that might not be suitable for human settlements anymore, the issues of drought, also of heavy rain events, and of sea level rise are probably the most crucial ones. If you talk about drought, you see here a picture by the European Commission that in southern Europe, and also some records of drought periods. This is of 2024. You see, for example, Italy has been heavily affected, but also the Balkan states and Romania especially, but also areas in Sweden where heavy drought events have been recorded, the heaviest drought events that have ever been there. So, of course, the question of habitability and of agricultural production and so are very crucial questions that potentially make areas inhabitable. Heavy flooding events. I'm just showing here a picture of a flooding event in 2021 in Germany that has killed 150 people, or more than 150 people, a dimension that has never been experienced in Germany before. And still the reconstructions in those areas are going on. So people tend to stay in those places that they used to live at, although the heavy destructions that those areas have been experiencing. And finally, sea level rise. I will for the end of my talk, I would like to give a short input into one area that is close to Bremen, Summer Dike, that you see here, that has been opened. So there's no real settlement area, it's an agricultural area, but there has been a really strong dispute around opening this dike to the water. So the idea of a strong dike protection, you see here the main dike that runs here. So it was not even the main dike that has been debated, but the very small dike in front of the main dike that was supposed to be opened as part of a compensation measure for a port construction. So this has been the circle where the dike has been opened, and there has been a very strong resistance against opening this dike, although it's not even a resettlement area. So the idea of withdrawing from certain areas to account for sea level change is really a very controversial issue that people in northern Germany at least don't want to talk about. This is how the area looks now. So the water is brought back into the area and people are enjoying it even a bit, but the controversies around this dike opening and the withdrawal of human activity from areas that are the subject of flooding has been very strong objected, as I said. So maybe to quickly come to an end, I think that in our research projects, we have not assumed direct causalities, and we also didn't find them in our research projects. We think that climate mobilities are a promising starting point to capture also complexities and the very political nature of climate migration, and also accounts for forms of immobilities that are often a bit overlooked in those discourses. And we also see a very slow opening of the European debates to the question of climate migration or climate mobility, and a strong resistance to consider that also Europe and maybe also North America are in fact also areas where some of those processes might unfold in future. and to maybe also lead to the next presentation that is coming now after this one is a map of the European prediction of climate change impact on land values that maybe also reflects a bit the factors that I've been showing before. So southern European countries are projected to lose land values in the course of climate change, mainly because of the incidences of flooding and heat waves that are projected for those areas. Also the Balkan states and Greece, where it is expected that land values are going to decrease, whereas countries in Northern Europe, also Northern Germany, Sweden, and parts of Finland, but also the UK are projected to that land values are going to increase in the course of climate change. And that's probably maybe a good link to the next talk. There are some sources, and with this, I'd like to end my presentation.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Johannes. It's very insightful presentations. So Johannes present 3 sections. First one is discourse related to the climate migrations, and it arises on the new terms, not climate migration, but climate mobilities, and then related to his projects in somewhat Ghana, Indonesia, and then also Singapore, Manila. And then the last part is climate migrations in Germany and Europe, how some evidence of the climate change and also the response of the European country related to the climate change. Thank you very much, Johannes, for your presentations. Now we move to the second speakers. Here we have Pak Sariffuddin. Okay, before we start presentation from Pak Sariffuddin, let me read his short bio. Pak Sariffuddin is an assistant professor at our Department of Urban and Regional Planning. He just graduated or obtained doctoral degree in Radboud University, Netherlands, with research interest related to the disasters and also climate change, and also related to the property market. And his latest publication is Housing Displacement and Replacement in Coastal Flood-Prone Area, Evidence from a Land and Building Text-Based Study in Indonesia. And Pak Sarif already published his works in some edited book and also journals. Okay, Pak Sarif, are you ready to present your works?
Ya, Bu. I'm
Okay.
ready.
Yeah, okay. Time is yours, Pak Sarif.
Ya, terima kasih, Bu Maya. Let me share my screens. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Dr. Johannes, Professor Iwandari, Dr. Maya Damayanti, and all participants. In this international lecture series, let me share with you my lecture entitled Tracing Climate Gentrification Through Property Tax Records. In 30 minutes, I will explain climate gentrification and its impact on coastal neighborhoods. I will talk from property market perspective, which we see the migration is not only spatial-based adaptations, but also the investment displacement. So when the neighborhood is abandonment by their inhabitant, it means there is disinvestment in the particular locations. So they or the inhabitant will invest in the destination location and will increase the property price there. But on the opposite sides, the abandoned property will continue decrease and transform to be shanty or slum areas. That's Dr. Johannes mentioned in his presentations. Okay, my name is Sariffuddin. Okay. In our perspective, climate gentrification not only explain the migration induced by climate change, but also refers to spatial demand displacements. This means decreasing the demand in particular locations such as flood-prone areas and increasing the demand in safer zone. Consequently, this dynamic will be recorded by property price changes. Thus, from our perspective, I mean from property market perspective, let me highlight that changes in property price, whether increasing or decreasing, refer to the balance between supply and demands. And then to track climate-induced displacement or climate gentrification itself, we can utilize property sale transaction and property tax history. In Indonesia, we have these two kind of data, PPHDP and PPP, or text to notification later. The transactions of property represent the meeting points, or we can say agreement between sellers and buyers. They agree not only the price, but they also agree in particular locations. I mean, if I sell a house in flood-prone area and there is a buyer in that location, it means we have a deal there. So the deal of our agreement here is represented by the price itself. So, and then through this we can observe the spatial equilibrium. Property price represents spatial equilibrium here. And then property tax history records property ownership changes. And then based on this, we can track them through personal information such as national identity number. So using a unique number of each parcel, and then we trace the property ownership changes, and then we can trace their mobility or their displacement from one area to another area, or from one coordinate, geographically coordinate to another location. So we can illustrate and then we can model it. And based on this, we can illustrate the migration based on property tax records. In our previous studies, I mean my dissertation, I utilize those two types of data. Property sale transactions are recorded by PPHDP or by establishing a tax on land and building rights and property tax records. Using panel data from 2013 to 2020, we can illustrate the property price changes, including the response to flood engine defense, such as a dike building in Pekalongan. Then using property tax record, we can trace the ownership successions and their destination displacement. From this, we can illustrate the neighborhood succession according to the theory. And this tracing could be done through utilizing the unique number from each parcel, and then we trace the ownership changes from each parcel. After that, we can observe and illustrate their mobility or their migrations. In order to see whether or not a correlation with coastal flood risk, we employ some statistical models such as multinomial logistic regressions to see the variable correlations. And then for measure the response of property markets, especially property price to coastal flooding, we can employ special econometric with some climate-related variables such as coastal flooding, slope, land subsidence, and land surface temperature, something like that. So we can include this variable into independent variables. This is the theoretical framework that we can use to how to see uh, climate migration from economic, especially from property markets. In property market studies, inhabitants or people could be understood as economic agents who consider their decision rationally based on the economy. Mendelssohn in 2000 published his paper about efficient adaptation to climate change. He employed the benefit and cost concept to to formulate yeah the correlation between marginal benefit, marginal cost, and marginal externalities. Adaptation is efficient only if the marginal benefit greater than or at least equal to marginal cost plus marginal externalities. And adaptation itself is part of marginal cost in for climate adaptation for climate change, because they have to spend for Indonesia, for example, in northern area of Java, they have to spend at least 20 million every 5 years. So this is a regular cost. So we couldn't see that this cost is part of marginal externalities. This is part of marginal cost. And then therefore displacement is also could be considered as only one adaptation strategy. Adaptation strategy here is how they can rebalance these expenses in flood-prone area, for example. Marginal benefits is perhaps equal or perhaps less than marginal cost and marginal externalities. Therefore, when they migrate or when they displace in safer area, and then they can avoid marginal cost for adaptations, they can get a better marginal benefit there. So this is the rational economic decision why they displace uh, from risky area to safer area. And therefore, climate change induces coastal flooding into the property market by formulating a new balance of individual expenses. Higher income inhabitant with a much greater budget for adaptation may relocate to safer area to avoid the extra cost here. Consequently, property price decrease as a result of the new balance between supply and demands. We can see that the effect of spatial place displacements means decreasing property demand in coastal area or in coastal flood prone area. In as consequence, property price decrease. Uh, in this case, if we talk about supply and demands, supply is constant, but demand is declining. Therefore, property price decrease. Although buyers can choose property everywhere with various property types, in fact, the market is limited, especially for lower income one. Now they take advantage of falling property price. The lower income inhabitant with limited ability to buy an expensive house, they will come and purchase houses in flood prone areas. So we can imagine this area is vulnerable because of flooding, and then inhabited by lower income people with low ability to maintenance their house and the environment. So uh, the locations continues to decrease because why? Because there is no investment for adaptations done by local inhabitant, I mean. Let's now explore the pivotal role of the benefit cost model in shaping effective private adaptation strategies. As I previously discussed, housing displacement is a multi-phase adaptation strategy. As an economic agent, each household must navigate a complex web of factors to adjust its housing consumptions and maintain a balance between marginal benefit, marginal cost, and marginal externalities. This is the normal, the regular consideration every day. We have to consider it rationally every day. From a global perspective, housing displacement or mobility is often related to three theories. Life cycle. First, there is a life cycle model, and in the current discussion, we know the life cycle course, which is an extended theory from a life cycle model. Because of there is a new member in family, and then they need a larger house, they displace to buy a bigger house in some places. This is how life cycle model explains the migrations. And then second, there is a cost benefit model in which the decision to displace is based on rational economic decision, namely to balance their expenditure or their expenses. And then the last is neighborhood change, which is constructed by changes in people and place. When we talk about changes in people, yeah, it happened due to migrations, outflow migration and inflow migration. So changes uh, is happen due to mobility here. Um, and then one professor from UK, Professor Brasington, if I'm not mistaken, he suggests that the three theories can be effectively distilled into a cost-benefit model, provided the losses and benefit are appropriately defined. And then this reduction not only simplifies the understanding, but also provide a robust framework for analysis, especially when we talk about combining economic perspective and adaptation strategy. Therefore, this figure explains how coastal flooding as an external shock influence the balance of individual equilibrium, particularly increasing marginal costs, decreasing marginal benefit, and marginal externalities in constant. And because of that, the household displays as a spatial demand response from risky area to safer area to balance their expenditure, to balance their expenses. Next, let me share with you all the empirical evidence from my previous study on the relationship between housing mobility induced by coastal flooding and property price decline. This finding have a significant practical implication for our understanding of housing dynamic. They can inspire a new approach to understanding neighborhood change and decline from the property market perspective. So I think this is my contribution in these discussions. How we measure the property, how we measure neighborhood change and decline from property market viewpoints. And using, we can say big data, because I screen over 1.9 million property tax data to observe property owner changes and residential mobility. We then combines mobility with the housing submarket, revealing cross submarket displacements. The image representation depict internal residential mobility. This study identified three types of housing displacement. First, risk to safe displacement is shown by arrow number one here, and then risk to risk displacement or micro displacement from risky area to another risky area. It's also displayed by arrow line number 2, and safe to risk displacement. This is the we can say anomaly. because they displace from safer area to risky area. When we model this migration using multinomial logistic regression, for example, the decisions of people to displace from a risky area to safer area is statistically correlate with coastal flooding variables. But the one who displaced from safer area to a risky area, there is no statistical evidence to conclude that they are strongly correlates. But when we add property price as a mediator variable, all type of displacement has strongly correlation with coastal flooding variable. So here we can see that property price is a mediator variable, or as the um, the main reason why they displace either from risky area to safer area, from safer area to risky area, or from risky area to another risky area. Therefore, from this screening data, we can observe neighborhood successions, which is previously conceptualized by Grigsby, and internal residential mobility, which identify across over housing submarkets. In property market perspective, we found that they displace not only from one area to another area, but they displace from one housing submarket to another similar housing submarkets. It means they displace from one neighborhood to another similar characteristic of neighborhoods. But in safer area, this neighborhood is quite similar, but safe. So they get a benefit in more benefit in safer area than in risk area. Back to our previous discussions. Property price changes, either increasing or decreasing, can capture changes in place and people or demand. So let's explore how property price change influenced by migration, particularly climate-induced migration, can serve as a key indicator of neighborhood change and decline, in my perspective. This is a pricing issue that significantly impact property market dynamic. In our study, in property market study, we assume that the utility, there is a theoretically assumptions that the utility of product is not determined by its goods or by the product itself, but is denoted by users or consumer. So based on these theoretical assumptions, household preference influence their decisions in purchasing. Uh, we can use hedonic property model, and this model state that this model composed by building structure, locational service, and environmental quality. When we talk about climate change and decreasing environmental quality, this is also part of uh, environmental quality in hedonic property modeling. So we can add this variable as independent variable. We assume that this variable will influence the preference of each buyer, and then they will internalize the risk into their decision to purchase the house. We back to the benefit and cost analysis in our previous discussions. Because coastal flooding damage the building structure and decrease the environmental quality, and inhabitants no, they require extra costs for maintenance and adaptations. And then they internalize the risk, and then property price changes is happen here. And then the lower income people who also think rationally based on economic, the balance between marginal cost, marginal externalities, and marginal benefit, they secure the lowering property price, and they accept the risk well burden the mitigation measure to the government. This is the, yeah, we can say the irony, or perhaps the the bad situations occurred in a coastal flood-prone area. And it is important to note that lower income individual also make rational economic decision here. Okay, from a property market viewpoint, because property price also represents spatial equilibrium, uh, or the meeting point, or the meeting point, or the agreement between supply and demand for property. This equilibrium is the what is it? We buy a house not only by the physical building, but we also buy the location. So property price is not only explains the building quality, but also the locational service or neighborhood service here. Therefore, in this perspective, property price will filter both property seller and purchaser in particular locations to increase the profit from the seller side, and increasing the benefit from the buyer side. And understanding the intricate relationship between property price and demands, particularly in the context of environmental quality, is, in my perspective, is crucial. And changes in property price, whether in response to improving or deteriorating environmental condition, significantly influence demand. So this understanding allow us to incorporate factors such as flood risk or environmental quality into property price, especially in discussion about, let's say, land value capture. Land value capture for climate adaptation, for example. We can involve climate adaptation, such as dike, water pumping, and something like that into our spatial econometric modeling. And evidently, the property market filter demands and strengthens the classical filtering theory. This is particularly important for understanding the spatial structure model, for example, concentric, sectoral, and multiple nuclei model. Yeah, in the classical theoretical model, it is a product of filtering theory. It is also clear that property market significantly shape land use, a factor that is currently not really um, receiving the attentions in Indonesia. We see land use planning from planning by law or from government sides, and we pay less attentions in property markets. And then, inspired by Lisa Pitts in 2013, she published her dissertation entitled Gentrification and Displacement, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Gentrification and Displacement Study, if I'm not mistaken. She revealed that gentrification, a key factor in the increasing value of property, also leads to spatial demand displacement, which influence the balance between, again, supply and demand in particular location. Moreover, they are ready to be displaced and gathered like in one similar locations, and then we can say this is housing submarket or market segmentations. One homogeneous property market in heterogeneous markets within the city. For example, they move from coastal area, which is in suburban area, into safer area, which is also in suburban area but safe. Consequently, their displacement shape the housing submarket. It grows to represent the dynamic of housing demand, or in theory, we can say endogenous evolution of space, explained by Lefebvre, the author of famous book La Production d'Espace, in France. This growth is also represented by property price spillover in image ones, which transmits property price adjustment in property price decrease from the epicenter in coastal area to nearby area. So this spillover, not this spillover represents the growth of host slum area in coastal neighborhood of Pekalongan, in my research area. This above phenomenon occurring in both the abandoned area and the destination location raises a compelling theoretical questions. Does climate-induced displacement or climate gentrification also influence urban sprawl in suburban area? I think this theoretical exploration not only delve into the spread of the building up regions, but also the response of the property market to market failure. As we conclude these presentations, I want to highlight the pivotal role of housing displacement in the spatial dynamic of the housing submarket or neighborhoods. This knowledge roots in the filtering theory and Grigsby reformulation is now evolving to encompass displacement within the city across housing submarkets. Our work as urban planners, housing policymakers, and academic researchers is essential and I think integral to comprehending and tackling this issue. And based on this discussion, let me give two recommendation for further research in urban planning. First, I think it is better to understand the link between climate gentrifications, market failure, especially in coastal areas, in Semarang, in Pekalongan, in Bangladesh, and etc. Particularly in global south. And link between climate gentrification, market failure, and also urban sprawl in Indonesia, particularly in our city in Semarang. And second, I think this also this study opens the theoretical debates and discussion about whether property price dynamic can also be used to measure city resilience. There is a status quo concept to explain resilience, if I'm not mistaken. The ability of system to return in normal situations. And property market also has the same idea. We have we call market memory, the returning value or returning property price after disaster. In global north, in Netherlands, for example, after 6 years of coastal disaster, property price will return to normal price. And however, there is no theoretical foundation whether this is kind of resilience or not. So I think this is we can discuss it later. Okay, and thank you very much for allowing me to share my work. Back to Bu Maya.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pak Sarif, for your presentations. So, Pak Sarif presentation remind us on the Johannes presentation before that in terms of casualties that climate migration is very complex and multifactorial, and Pak Sarif addressed related to the property market factors that influence the decision of the people to move or to migrate to other place. And Pak Sarif introduced the other terms that before we learn about climate migrations, climate mobility, and now climate gentrifications. Pak Sarif using structural hedonic price models to exploring the phenomena in the coastal area related to the floods. Thank you, Pak Sarif, for your valuable presentations. Now we move to the question and answer sessions. Let me see. We have question from Dina Aulia in here to Pak Johannes Herbeck. I'm interested in getting a better understanding what is the basis argumentation of differentiations between climate mobility and migrations. So, Pak Johannes, please answer.
Yes, thank you for the question. I mean, it's a relatively recent turn in the debate around climate migration to kind of step back from using migration as a term. And there has been, for example, Ingrid Boas, which I've cited before, who argues for talking of climate mobilities instead of climate migration. And the main reason why she does so is, I mean, there are several reasons why she argues for that. I will refer to some of them. First, as I tried to show at the beginning of my presentation, at least how the discourse has been led in European countries in the global north, with this idea that there might be millions and millions of people who are migrating from hotspots of climate impacts to better off countries, has also been connected to, for example, the reinforcement of border control measures as one of the consequences of that. And as Boas and colleagues state, as there's no direct observable or empirical proof for that, this has to be somehow reflected in the terms that we are using. And by using mobility, it also replaces a term that is also connected to those security implications and the fears that are evoked in European countries by using a more positively connotated term like mobilities. That's one reason. The second reason would be that mobilities also, the use of mobilities also allows for recording immobilities, because migration has a very clear understanding of realized movements from one place to the other, whereas mobility also looks at the potentials of movement. And in this way, the use of mobilities also allows for looking at, for example, populations that are trapped in certain areas, because they don't have the potential to move, although they would wish for. So this focus on immobility is also somehow related to the attempt to replace migration with mobilities. And then finally, maybe as last point, also something that we took up in our research projects, the transfer from climate migration to climate mobilities also allows to look at not only the mobility of people that are that are important, but also the mobility of knowledges and ideas, as we did, for example, in our project on Immersa and Blue Urban. So we also were interested in how far the climate discourses also create the possibilities for an exchange of knowledges and ideas across borders that are then, for example, going into adaptation strategies and decisions that are taking place in certain areas. So those are maybe three factors and I hope this answers your question to a certain extent, that have been put into place when arguing for using climate mobilities instead of climate migration.
Okay, thank you very much, Johannes. And I will give opportunity for the audience to raise your question directly to both speaker, please. If you have question, just raise your hands. No questions?
Can I answer? Can I ask the question to both presenter?
Yes, please, Bulandung.
I'm using the raise hand emoticon, but I think it's not working. Thank you very much for the insightful experience you share with us, Johannes. I have totally agree with your last comment about mobility and immobility. At the moment, I'm also doing research on how community respond to the disaster induced by climate change that disrupt their livelihood. And the majority of the people living in the coastal area and they are disturbed by the tidal floods choose to stay, not to be relocated. And I think it is because of the social and cultural influence that decided them to better stay and adapt it themselves, physically and non-physically. So how do you think about that? Do you think that, in your opinion, social and cultural influence also the way they decided to be immobile? And then second one to Pak Sarif, thank you very much for the perspective on how economic influence the climate gentrification. I want to see your ideas, maybe how to include or integrate the information from your data harvest to be able to give the planning officials understanding that in order to plan something, you need to calculate the risk. Because in Indonesian cases, most of the land readjustment plan is differentiated only by the economic factor, which comes strategic, which more profitable, then it will be more prioritized. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your answer.
Yeah, thank you, Bulandung. Pak Johannes, I think the first question is for you.
Yes, thank you, Bulandung. I mean, absolutely. As I have not been able to really dive deep into the European or the German examples that I've been showing a bit, I mean, they already answer probably your question. The first example that I brought was this flooding in the Ahrtal with 150 causalities, which was really a massive experience and an unprecedented also experience of fatalities directly resulting from flooding. And so that happened 2021. So if you look at the area today, you would see that most of the houses that have been heavily affected by this flooding back then have been rebuilt at the very places that they were before, and not only because of private investments that people used to reconstruct their houses. It was also supported by the government, who would also allow and support people to rebuild their houses at the very same places than before. And the main argument for those people who did this were very much related to what you called now social or cultural aspects or so. I mean, people who have been living in those areas for their whole lives or even over more generations or so, they would be very hesitant to leave those places. Also, in the direct aftermath of the event, there were voices that were saying, now this has showed us that those are high-risk areas of events that might not have happened in the past so frequently, but are expected to happen more frequently in future because of climate change. So, but even with this information at hand and the direct experience, people would choose to stay in their also social networks and the areas that have a meaning to them. And the same, I would say, also applied to the second example that I brought up, this small dike opening along the northern German coast. There is a very clear paradigm of coastal protection in northern Germany that translates to keep the dike line intact. So not consider shifting dikes and maybe opening up certain areas that are probably also related to what Sariffuddin just showed, that are probably protecting areas with less value than maintaining the dike would take from the budget of the state. So even in those situations, there's no negotiation around opening up dikes or giving up areas. And that is also related very much, I would say, to a cultural question. Some of those dikes are 1,000 years old. They have been, the first parts of those dike structures have been built in the Middle Ages and have been maintained ever since by diking associations and also by the people who live behind the dike. So there's a very strong also cultural connection to those infrastructures that protect those areas. So absolutely, those factors are very important when it comes to people's decision to stay in place and to also not give up their areas. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Johannes, for your answer. Sarif?
Yeah, thank you, Pulanding, for the questions. In my perspective, property market should take place in adaptations to complement, we can say, plan adaptations by the governments. So the position between governments and property markets should be equal. So they has a similar role in shaping land use and also spatial planning itself. This idea actually come from the planning by law and property right from Professor Nidam and also Thomas Hartmann from Dortmund University, if not mistaken. They argue that if we only depend on plan adaptation from governments, sometimes this adaptation is locked in situations. For example, in Indonesia, we revise our spatial planning every 5 years because because this is the regulation, right? However, disaster is happening every time. Now, tomorrow, or we don't know when it will happen. So in my perspective, flexible instruments to manage or to navigate the property market, especially in risky area is important. And then I think we can push them using market force. So here we can complement the instrument from the government, or we can say plan by law from the government with property markets here. So I think if government can capitalize the risk, and they can predict the property price, they can argue, they can negotiate with property developers, for example. I have empirical evidence in Pekalongan. I have data from 2013 until 2020. The property price is decreasing, normally decreasing, but in 2017, in 2017, property price was increased. Because why? Because the governments builds a dike, and then using these adaptations, the developer um, advertise, we are in the safe place, so come here. We provide a good place for you, for example, like that. And then property price increase. After that, in 2020, property price again decrease and decrease until now. Thank you, Bu Maya and Bu Landung.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Johannes and Pak Sarif. Actually, we still have some questions in the chat rooms, but I will give opportunity first for Pak Johannes to respond, or to have, if you have question to Pak Sarif, and also if Pak Sarif has question to Pak Johannes, please. Pak Johannes.
Yes, thank you very much. And in fact, I do have a question for Pa Sariffuddin. Thank you also very much for your presentation, which I really found fascinating. And also, I mean, the main, or one of the charms really lies into your big data approach, I think. Just trying to get empirical evidence out of the data that you have, and you have, I think, an impressive database that you can really work with. What I was wondering a bit, I mean, also now your answer has been on the previous question has been quite fascinating. The impact then of government engagement or government programs on those property prices. What I was wondering, in how far, when you now depart from the idea of the rational economic behavior that very much determines household or also individual decisions, where to buy land. I think one of the fundamental aspects that are prerequisites that you would need for this rational economic behavior is knowledge about those factors that are important for also determining your property prices. And I think that's often not the case either with regard to the flooding event. In many occasions, people would not be aware of the threats, or also the changes of threats that are expected in those areas. You might have a rough idea what actual risks look like, but you don't have an idea what the future will bring. And second, also when it comes to this government interventions, because they are so crucial elements, and people often, it's impossible to know them in advance. So in how far does the available knowledge play a role in your considerations and also your calculations?
Yeah.
Yes, Pak Sarif, please answer.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Dr. Johannes, for the questions. Yeah, knowledge is important here. When they has a rational backgrounds, to see the risk as a risk and not risk as not, is not a problem, they will think rationally. But when they do not see the risk as a risk or as a problem, they will, they will see that this is not the problem, so they will stay there, or perhaps they stay there, but they may adapt by themselves. For example, increasing the land, increasing the house, and something like that. In rational economic behavior, and in correlation with coastal flooding and climate change, we found some evidences from global south, including from Philippines and also Thailand. Um, we call it as dissonant risk perceptions. Dissonant risk perception. Dissonant risk perception means actually they are in rich locations, but they has dissonant risk perception. Because why? Psychologically, when we can handle the problem, we will we will argue that this is not problem. For example, if I can manage for example, snake, snake. So, and perhaps Bumaya couldn't handle the snake. For Bumaya, snake is a problem, but for me, snake is not problem. For example, like that, including water, including water. In China's perspective, for example, in China's perspective, water is, what is it? How to say in English, Bumaya? Rezeki. What is it?
Yeah, symbol of prosperity, maybe.
Oh yeah, the symbol of prosperity, perhaps. Yeah. So water is not problem. Water is symbol of prosperity from the gods. So when our area is flooding, it means we couldn't manage the thing from the gods. So they have different perspective to see the risk or to see the problem itself. So yeah, this is interesting. This is quite interesting question, Dr. Johannes. This is not only in Chinese. In Indonesia, for example, in Jakarta, we have Pulau Gadung. Yeah, Pulau Gadung. Pulau Gadung is industrial district in Jakarta, and this is also flood prone areas. But investor there decide to still live there in Semarang as well, in Tanjung Mas. China's people, they still live there in flood prone areas. Because why? Because they believe they live in the head of dragon. Because this is the opportunity, the prosperity. This is the location to to increase their possibility to increase their prosperity. So knowledge and rational thinking is the key here. So we have different perspective, I think. And for the second question, I'm sorry, I forgot your last question, Dr. Johannes.
No, I think it was only one question
Okay.
regarding the availability of knowledge. But thanks for your answer. I think that was also quite fascinating. That it's not only, I mean, even if there is knowledge available to everyone, still the interpretation would also be different in many cases. Now, if you explain, for example, the Chinese perspective on water, and so even if you think that every actor has information about, for example, those risks, the interpretation of those risks might still differ. So thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome, Dr. Johannes.
Okay. Sarif, do you have question to Pak Johannes? Maybe short questions.
Yeah. In terms of climate mobility and migrations, and this is also impact a lot to the environmental conditions in destination area. What should government do to to prevent or perhaps to handle this issue, Pak Johannes?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, that's also a very interesting part of the debate in how far then migration itself causes environmental problems or destructions or so. I mean, I can talk about Germany maybe in recent years, and as you've mentioned, urban sprawl also as a potential impact. That is probably the where it goes most, or where it's most tangible, that there is an impact. If people are moving to an area, urban sprawl will probably occur. And I think in recent years there have been strategies that have been developed in European or German cities, how to prevent urban sprawl in situations of growing settlements. So probably that would be at least a very humble answer to that. To take those strategies serious, how to grow cities without creating urban sprawl and expanding city, for example, sealed areas in the outskirts of the cities. So in Germany, there's this term of how to translate to English, triple or multiple inner development. So instead of cities growing and expanding to the outskirts, cities should concentrate on qualifying existing inner city areas, also creating more dense settlement areas in places that are already developed. So to condensate housing in those areas, at the same time creating opportunities for expanding greening. Of course, those are high challenges and also paradox situations, but there are strategies how to ensure this qualification and densification of existing settlement structures instead of expanding city areas.
Yeah.
I hope this answers your question to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Johannes and Pak Sarif. And we move back to the audience, and we have Bu Astri. Please, Bu Astri, you already raised your hands.
Okay, thank you, Bu Maya. May I ask a question to both of the speaker? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dr. Johannes and Pak Sarif for the presentation. So I would like to ask to Dr. Johannes and Pak Sarif. As you mentioned before, climate migration can cause population displacement and impact the need of for adequate housing in other safer location. This has an impact on residential development, especially in suburban area. Based on this condition, what do you think is the best strategy to accommodate housing needs due to the impact of climate migration? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Astri. And Pak Johannes, maybe you will answer it first and then continue with Pak Sarif. Thank you.
I mean, thank you for your question. I think it's nothing that we really focus on in our research projects, but maybe I can also connect to what I've answered before. I mean, if there is the need to increase housing capacities in either in existing city quarters or in newly created city quarters, I think there are also strategies how to ensure that those are livable places, that people who might even be traumatized by extreme events that they have experiencing before, and that are really displaced from the places where they grew up. There are strategies how to make sure that housing is adequate, is considering the needs of those who will have to settle there. And I think one of the key elements would be, or what I would probably argue here, is that the participation of people is crucial in those contexts, that people also do have a word in the design, in the actual setup of the places that they are supposed to move into. Of course, we all know that under austerity policies, and so the availability of adequate resources for building up those new city quarters or housing facilities is a crucial point that we cannot neglect. But I think with proper and serious participation, at least some of those issues of livability and of housing needs of those who will have to move there can be addressed, or at least be more likely to be addressed in those strategies.
Yes, Pak Sari. Yes.
Yeah, I think it is important questions, Mbak Astri, how we provide affordable housing for people, particularly for lower income ones, in response to climate migration, climate gentrifications, and perhaps urban sprawl in suburban areas. The basic concept of urban sprawl here is when there is one housing submarket is failure, they failed, and then the house or the city has to accommodate the urbanizations from migration, and also from inner from the city itself in suburban area. So in this case, in my perspective, I think we means the governments need to manage the property markets. I mean, if we let the property market grow by themselves and then occupy the location according to market behavior, according to economic behavior, only for market, only from market to market, yeah, I think someday the coastal area that is currently experience the flooding and climate change will continues decrease and declines. So they have no choice, because why? Because in fact, even though we all of us has freedom to choose a house according to our preference, but in fact, the stock in market is limited. And I think this is the task of government to, perhaps to provide it, or perhaps to manage it. Many articles has revealed that, for example, in our country, in Indonesia, we couldn't know, we didn't know how many people has more than one houses, and then which one is inhabited and which one is just for investment. So, for example, like this. So I think controlling property markets is the key. Sprawl is also the effect of property market, uncontrolled property market, I mean. So yeah, I think we need to control property market. This is my question, Mbak Asri. Thank you, Mbak.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Astri, and also Johannes and Pak Sarif. And we have two questions in the chat rooms from Ida and also from Prof. Narti. I will I think this question is very related with Bu Astri previous questions. I will make it simple. So both questions is related to the issue of settlement of the people due to the to the climate change, and it can be influence on the marginalized groups. They can be displaced from their inhabitants, I mean, from their place. And then the government can make some program to move them to the other place, but some of them refuse. And so the basic question from those participants is how to ensure that people can live properly, and how to ensure that people can accept this policy. I think Pak Johannes and Pak Sarif, you may answer these questions. From Pak Johannes first, you can use the example in your research project, particularly in Europe's countries, please.
I mean, the European in the European case, it's not very common that you would see forced migration due to government land acquisition, especially in the context of climate-related policies. I was, when reading your question, I was trying to think of examples where things like that might occur. I mean, you would see maybe some examples in the context of dike constructions. So if you're talking about sea level change and adaptation strategies towards this, so currently the dikes in northern Germany are heightened by a meter to allow for climate change or for sea level rise until the end of the century. So 1 meter is added on top of all existing dike structures, and that often means that the dikes are not only getting higher, but they are also getting wider, apparently. And so there are some occasions where lands that are needed for making dikes broader have to be acquisition or acquired by the government. But in most cases, the compensation schemes for those land acquisition in the context of climate adaptation programs are quite high, and normally there's not huge resistance against those. And in most cases, it also doesn't mean that people have to really move, but they would probably lose a part of their property, but being compensated for that. I'm always puzzled to see that on the other way around, it's not a big problem. So probably the highest land acquisition and also displacements of people in Germany have happened in the context of coal mining. So there are huge areas in Germany, at least or especially in North Rhine-Westphalia, where people and whole villages had to be displaced in order to be able to mine brown coal fields that are on the surface, so surface mining, and it was not there was not a huge debate around those issues. So for those old fossil industries, displacements has been a very common strategy, and one that has been, of course, resisted locally, but there has not been a a major discourse like on a larger societal level around those displacements. So there's no problem to do that if the fossil industry is behind it. So that's what I would say with regard to your question.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes. Pak Sarif, please.
Yeah, Bu Maya, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Sunarti. I think there are two perspectives to answer this question, Prof. Sunarti. One perspective is from property buyers or from inhabitant, I mean, and the second perspective is from governments. From government, for example, there are some program, let's say payout program in, for example, in United States of America. They buy a house and also land in risky areas, and then they relance, they convert from build up area into land, just land for park and something like that. So the government buy the houses and also lands, and then they convert into, or they reland, into open space. And the second perspective is from property buyers or inhabitants. In our perspective, we decide to stay in particular area because of livelihoods. Livelihood not only refer to where we work for, but we also how we enjoy the urban facilities. Therefore, in our perspective, there is terminology about locational quality or neighborhood service. Neighborhood service means how the neighborhood can facilitate can serve the our needs in particular locations. Therefore, my research evidence also reveal that the uh, the migrations occurs from one housing submarkets to another similar characteristic housing submarkets. One submarket is in flood-prone areas and another submarkets in safe areas, but they both are similar when we talk about urban facilities, about many things about locational quality, environmental quality, and also building quality or structural quality. So I think when we can provide it, this is I think the first step to provide livable housing for them. And then the second answer is, as mentioned by Dr. Johannes in previous discussions. This is about knowledge and also the interpretations. We can refer to Lancaster demand theory. That's the utility of product is determined by users and not determined by product itself. He give the example why red Chevrolet in United States of America at that time in 2000 in 17 and 20, if I'm not mistaken, why red Chevrolet was more expensive than black Chevrolet. Because why? Because of limited demand for uh, highest demand for red Chevrolet. This is not only about the number of supply and demand, but this is also talk about the perceptions. This is talk about their knowledge. Therefore, I think we have three layers to address this issue. First, from government layers, government has to have the project or program to secure this area. And then second, we need to control property market. And then the third, we have to educate them to this is you are in risky area, you will lose your investment because blah 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 and something like that. And then perhaps we have to socialize the risk to inhabitants in my opinion, like this. Bu Maya and Prof. Sunarti, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Johannes and Pak Sarif. We have Pak Asnawi who already raised hand in here, but due to limited times, I will ask Pak Asnawi to have short questions. Okay, short questions. Sorry for that. Please, Pak Asnawi.
Yeah, thank you very much. For Dr. Johannes, you live in industrialized country, and your research also conducted in the developing countries. Do you think the livelihood condition can affect the perception of the people to live in the risk area or to live in not in the risk area? Normally in developing country, the people some perspective said that they much know about their own life than us. So I am in some degree I am not agree that we try to give our perspective to them as if we know about their need, their calculation. So sometimes this is like in Aceh, after disaster, the central government try to resettle the people in the more safer area, but the local people said we better know our self than the central government, like that. So in terms of the community, it is in your research, is there any differences between the industrialized community and the developing community, where developing country depend on the informal sector? They live in the affordable house and access the livelihood and access the location, like Pak Sariffuddin said. This is the very, very important and fundamental prioritize for them, comparing to the more safer area, but they lost their job, for example. So is there any difference between the industrialized community and non industrialized community in developing country, based on your research? And Pak Sarif, is there any influence also why they compete to live in the risk area? Is there any relationship with the type of the livelihood of their family? Sometimes they work in this area because they have, for example, they have no skill to work better, and in this area there are many unskilled labor needs, and they choose this comparing to another place that more safe than in this area. So the livelihood type, I asked Sarip, is there any information about the jenis pekerjaan, yeah, from the inhabitant that make them stay, yeah, in this area. I think that. Thank you very much, Bu Maya.
Thank you, Pak Asnawi, and please, Pak Johannes, and we'll continue by Pak Sarif.
Thank you very much, Pasnavi, for your very interesting and important question. I mean, it's always difficult, and I also refrain a bit from making direct comparisons between different areas. But I think what probably in relation to your question, what stands out a bit, if you look at those recent examples of environmental hazards in the German and European context, I would say that there has been a remarkable absence of knowledge with regard to those events. Especially if you look at those flooding and the heavy rain events that I've described a bit. Although it is more or less known that some of those people live in high risk areas, people tend to forget or don't consider them to be in a risky area. Although, I mean, if you look around in those areas and, for example, look at historical buildings in those places that would, for example, be built on raised grounds, there is an environmental knowledge, a traditional environmental knowledge also in those areas, but I think a lot of it has been lost. And one explanation, or one possible explanation, would be that people have a high trust in government institutions and rely more or less on their management capacities, often overestimating those capacities. So this strong rely on government actions and this feeling of not being responsible, or not only being individually responsible for taking care and for preparing for those events, might be one part of this explanation, that often this knowledge is not that present, or not even if it is not used by people living in those high risk areas. And probably that is, as you yourself has described it as well, is maybe different in some of the less industrialized countries, where the feeling of being responsible on your own for taking care and preparing to those situations is maybe higher. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Johannes. Pak Sarif?
Thank you, Pak Johannes.
Yeah, Pak Asnawi, thank you for the questions. I don't have evidence from my research to answer your question, Pak Asnawi, because I use secondary data, and I have income data sets, but I don't have their type of job. However, in several articles explains that, yeah, it influence the influence their decisions to relocate, or perhaps to stay in one particular locations. For example, in not only job, skin color. In the United States of America, there is term white flights when the black people come to the white community, and then the white community, displaced from these locations. And then one article explained this is the phenomenon of white flights. And even though the urban facilities is similar, the locational quality is also good, but property price still decrease and decrease. Because why? Because the users change or demand changes. This is only the example in from the United States of America, and then another example is from I'm from Maastricht, but from Maastricht from Netherlands. There is property abandonment as well in Netherlands, even though yeah, the most effective urban planning in the world is in Netherlands, but they still have a similar problem. Because why? Because of locations. They live in inaccessible locations, so they yeah, inhabitant abandon the property, they leave the locations, and yeah, we found property plate there, or property plate, yeah, like this, Pak Asnawi.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak
Thank
Asnawi,
you,
Pak Johannes, and Pak Sarif.
Pak Sarif.
Yeah, before I close these sessions, I think we have Prof. Wiwi in here. Prof. Wiwi, would you please give some concluding remarks maybe related to this topic today?
Please, Mumaya, I'm just enjoying the discussions and happy to know that most of the colleagues give some interesting questions. I believe Pak Sarif and Pak Johannes, it's quite challenging questions, I think, yeah. And I'm happy that this is really, as you know, I have also one publication related in mobility, and I have particular interest also with this topic, and happy actually Pak Johannes that Pak Sarif research is also focusing on this related topic, yeah, climate change, adaptations, property, and so on. So I hope, and we also have some colleague like Pak Asnawi, Prof. Sunardi, Astrid, we are very much focused on this topic, and I hope we will have more opportunity to develop research to combine between migrations issues and climate change, which I think very relevant and important for the Indonesian development in particular. And happy that we can learn also from your presentations, yeah, from Europe or Germany in particular experience. So I will stop here, Bu Maya. Thank you again, Pak Johannes, Pak Sarif, and also Bu Maya for your nice moderation.
Thank you very much, Prof. Wiwi. Yeah, I agree with Prof. Wiwi that today's session is very interesting, and we can learn a lot about climate migration. Even the terms itself is very complex. I think there's some people using climate migration, climate mobility, climate gentrifications. It's only the terms, but yeah, it is complex but very interesting to be studied. I'm sure and I hope the scholar in here, including the students, have interest in studying this topic in the futures. And on behalf of our colleagues in here and also all the participants, we will give appreciation to Pak Johannes and Pak Sariffuddin for the insightful talk presentations and also discussions related to this topic. Thank you very much. And wassalamualaikum, and I will give the time to Bu Astri to close these sessions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Johannes Herbeck and Bapak Sariffuddin. Such an inspiring and fruitful discussion we have here today. And thank you, Ibu Maya, for moderating the main session. Before we close this event, we would like to say thank you for the support from the honorable guest lecturer today. We are gratefully appreciated your time to be here with us this evening. For documentation purpose, I invite all the participants to open the camera. We will have a photo session. Mbak Inu, please take the screenshot. Okay, I will count. 3, 2, 1. Okay, maybe once again. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And this event about to come to the very end. I hope you found the presentation today are informative and helpful. And we hope that this event will bring an inspiration and the positive impact for all of us. For those who would like to hear again this international lecture series, please kindly check on YouTube channel at PWK Undip TV Official. Please forgive us for our shortcomings. We look forward to seeing you in the next international lecture series. I hope you all have a good day. Thank you, good evening, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you all.
Dah, Johannes.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
thank
Johannes.
you, thank you very
Thank you,
much. Terima
Johannes.
kasih.
Terima kasih.
Sama-sama.
Danke, danke.
Terima kasih.
Bye soon.